this first question. I am a CMO at a biotech company, and looks like they're aligned with your view that this year is a prove it year.
Mhm.
Um, Parts of my organization seem scared by AI. Everything from distrust in LLMs to job security. Have you seen this, and how have you helped, navigate that in the organization? Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're doing a lot of work to alleviate this. So I think my response to this is really in two parts. I think I alluded to the first one, and this is probably the more important one, which is just AI literacy
Mm-hmm.
from everyone across the organization. So we do a lot in this space to debunk what AI isn't and really talk about what AI is and teach the organization on what are the basics of it, what are the nomenclature that's being used, what are some of the tools, how people are thinking about prompts. So I think AI literacy is an absolute must-have
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that everyone really understands what this means in this new world. And I think the second thing, and we do a lot of work in this space, and it's actually near and dear to my heart, is really understanding how a machine and a human can work together. So,
Okay.
for example, we take an organization and we look at an individual functional area. Let's just take R&D, for example. What we do is we help companies take stock and inventory of what are all the individual tasks that are being done within that function
Yeah.
and figuring out what truly can be done by a machine
Yeah.
and what's going to need human
Yeah.
intervention and trying to figure out what is the way to supercharge a human to use machines
Yeah.
better. And I think
Absolutely.
that really helps to debunk the fact that AI is coming for my job.
Yeah.
It's AI is going to help me do my job way better. And so that's, I think, an exercise that every company could probably go through,
Sure.
and probably do it on rinse and repeat every year as things evolve. But I think those are the two things that I would say in response to that question.
Yeah, we hear it all the time. And I think that's very thoughtful. How do you bring those two groups together? And it's a force multiplier for
Absolutely.
employees. And it's so important for leaders as they're planning for the future to really think about how does that help their organizational design.
Yep.
Um, okay, another question in here. As we think about ROI for agentic AI, beyond the metrics, what are some areas where in drug discovery, supply chain, medical writing, where quasi-independent AI agents could be transformative? Like where can we get really quick wins?
I think,
And maybe I'll ask for the
yeah,
audience, can you help define, agentic AI is this nebulous concept in some ways for
sure,
some folks. Maybe you could start
sure.
with defining that and then answer.
Yeah, I mean, agentic AI at its basic form is just trying to figure out a way to equip machines and agents to use better data to start making decisions on their own, acting
Mhm.
as your agent essentially. And so we're going to see a lot more of this. I think anyone who watched Dreamforce and watched Benioff kick off,
Yeah.
this was the topic du jour at Salesforce, and is the topic of many different companies. So that is a question I can't answer specifically and broadly. I think that has to be answered at the individual organizational
Mhm.
level. So the question is broad. It's a good one, but I would say take it in steps. Don't try to solve it for everything with agentic
Yeah.
AI. Try to figure out what are your one or two biggest pain points, break it down to its component parts, and figure out what can, again, actually be machinized.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing behind it now in this world of agentic AI is how good is the underlying data for the agent to actually make that decision.
Right.
And that is the biggest problem that we're going to face. I think that the weird dichotomy, and Frank DeFesh, I think from Salesforce mentioned this at JP Morgan, was, you know, the weird part is the more and more data that we have, the more valuable it is, which is literally the
Mm.
reverse of everything else, right? The more of something you have, the more commoditized it gets. Usually the value goes down, but with
Yeah.
data, it's the opposite. So the better and more good quality data that we have, the better ability you're going to have for your agents to make those autonomous decisions that you can feel comfortable with.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it really starts there. And so I would encourage you to, again, work with the folks that are responsible for your data platforms and really understanding what's there and figuring out what are the potential barriers for doing things with agents are.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, I'm going to encourage folks to. I have a few more questions here that we'll go through, and please add into the Q&A if there's anything top of mind for you. Um, okay, next question on here. Love the data capability time framing. I really like that framework too. My company is keen on building still.
Mhm.
Besides the above, any data points or advice on how to encourage my leadership to look at vendors?
Yeah, I think it also comes down to your business case. So I question companies that jump in to build immediately.
Yeah.
To me, as a consultant, having done this for 20 years, I immediately just look at that company and say, Are you just looking to kingdom build at this point? Are you trying to save your job? Like, what is the rationale for building?
Right.
Is it truly that you feel like you have the capabilities to do this better than anybody else, or is there something else at hand? So I would encourage companies to go back to, well, first of all, was there a business case?
Yeah.
Or did somebody just make this decision in a silo?
Right.
If there wasn't one, there should be. And then go revisit that business case again and really, again, understand what those components are that made the company think that it was the right decision to build. And if that was 6 months ago, I would argue the marketplace is very different than it was 6 months ago.
For sure.
It is free information to go out and look and see what companies are doing, what a peer AI is doing out in the marketplace. You don't even need to pull in your procurement team to do this at this point in time. These are free conversations. What I see is that the industry is also moving towards a much more collaborative environment where companies like yours are very happy to have these conversations.
Sure, yeah.
You know, even if it doesn't lead to business immediately, you plant a seed and you have a meaningful conversation. So I would really question looking at business cases and again, figuring out at what point in time was that decision made? Why was it approved? And is it salient and relevant today?
Yeah. I like that lens of continuing to check in because I mean we even see it every quarter. The technology looks different, the capabilities are different. You're adding these capabilities, use cases so fast and seeing the value. Your decision today may look different from even one quarter ago.
Exactly.
And I think back to your point earlier, that's where governance is so important. Like, what is your cadence of continuing to evaluate your strategy in real time because we're moving fast. Okay. Next question I see here. There is a lot of hype around AI. Everyone is an AI company. How do we, as leaders, really separate hype from reality?
I think it goes back to what I said already, is just be a student and try to work with the technologists at your company to separate fact from fiction. And I think the other big thing with that as well, and it kind of goes back to literacy, is be open and honest with your organization about how fast your organization is leaning into AI.
Yeah.
I am working with a pharma company right now here in the Bay Area, and they've been very open about saying, we don't feel comfortable with AI. While we allow you as the individual employee to use ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot and whatever tool we have, we as an organization are not willing to invest a lot of money right now at the enterprise level in AI because we don't feel comfortable with it. So I think the bottom line is just be transparent and open with your company on where you stand today. But you better be able to back it up.
Sure.
Because the business is going to push you 20 ways until Sunday on trying to move forward with AI.
Right.
So I think you've got to be a student of where things are today and be transparent with your company on why you feel that certain way. And then you as an individual, I think you also have to be a student and continue to push the limits with your organization to, again, get people to understand the value of what you're trying to push for. And again, do it in a quantifiable way. It's not just, oh, our world's going to become better. Use metrics, use data to make your point and put it in a business case.
Yeah, I think that's great. And continue to, keep that up to date, keep everyone up to speed.
Yep.
I guess I have a question in that regard. We see different companies with roles specifically for AI strategy. Do you think organizationally that should be its own role, or does AI strategy belong to everyone? And I ask that because things are moving fast across so many dimensions, not just the technology, but what we're seeing in the landscape.
Yeah.
Is it a full-time standalone job? Is it kind of the job of everyone?
So I will speak on behalf of me and not my company or my clients. I personally believe that every company should appoint somebody to be either a chief AI officer or have that similar type of title and build a structure of folks underneath them. I think embedding that into a CTO role or a CIO role is just too much at this point in time.
Right.
Or even like a chief innovation officer, even that role is already too meaty. So for me, I specifically believe in having that be a separate carve out of a functional area. It doesn't need to be a massive set of folks, but at least a small set of folks that are willing again to learn, to speak on behalf of the company, and to make sure that they have the technical prowess to be able to understand what's happening in the marketplace today.
Yeah.
And that's it. I think there's a lot of hesitance to put people in that role, and I think people are wearing too many hats at this point in time, based on what we're seeing. I think it's a carve out that absolutely should take place. So
Yeah, great point. All right, another question I see here. Bharathram, you shared earlier that large pharma has invested a lot in AI and seemed to suggest they may be ahead of the rest of us in mid-sized pharma. Besides that, are you seeing any differences between startups, mid-sized biotechs, large pharma, and how they're approaching or using AI in their organizations? And for me also, are you seeing any differences as you engage in conversations between these orgs?
yeah, I think startups is hard, right? Because you've got so many other priorities, competing priorities to just show your investors that you're in a good spot. So I think it's very hard to make those big investments in AI. But I think from a small and mid cap perspective, you don't have to go investing tens of millions of dollars in AI. But I think the two things that I see are, again, putting in place the right governance in place to make sure that the business is ported the right way, and then having the ability to have use cases come in and prioritize the right way. And I think going back to your point on investment, or the question on investment, is do you guys have a methodology to be able to calculate or quantify what the value is?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that is no, or kind of, it's probably not good enough. And so I think before you even think about, oh, we as a company are going to invest $10 million this year on AI, and we're going to allocate it across three or four different things, before you even say that statement or make a declaration like that, you really have to figure out, where you are from a standardization perspective and from a valuation perspective to really understand how to prioritize what use cases are going to get built out first and why.
Yeah.
And so I would argue, put the money aside for a second and start to understand what the value is of each of these initiatives are. And if there's a question, if I didn't fully answer the question, I'd be happy to talk offline to that individual and show, what are some of those valuation methodologies that we're seeing across the board. But I think that's where I would start.
Yeah. So you're saying across any type of organization, ensure you have a strategy, governance model, kind of plan in place before you move forward.
And evaluation methodology.
And evaluation methodology. Yeah, I agree. I think that's where, question said, how do we see differences as we engage? I think my view is very similar. Sort of, do you have a strategy? Do you have a view? Do you have a path? Versus is it the wild, wild west internally? Value is there at any stage company, startup to mid-size to large. Like you said, the investment maybe look different, but the value is really there. And I'll say back to your point, I've seen us playing that consultative role many times because now we've seen the patterns of what has worked and enough to take that learning sort of going forward to the next organization to say, even if you don't have a framework for measuring, we'll help you create that. And you can use, our frameworks on how to do that.
Exactly.
And I think to your point, that's where it is great to engage different startups and sort of get that feel for what, what's happening in different organizations too. Couple more questions and I'll ask folks to keep jumping in. Could you provide some more thoughts on the functions of medical affairs that are eliminated, affected, boosted, compared to other functions as well?
Do you want to take this one first?
I'd love your perspective.
I can start. I think the interesting, well, could you restate the question? Because I want to make sure I'm getting it right.
Well, it says, could you provide your thoughts on what functions of medical affairs are likely to be eliminated, or I'll put my words into it, boosted, augmented by AI, compared to other functions?
Not eliminated. I don't think that's the right word to use here. And I don't think that's the right action that we're really seeing right now in the industry, which is a good thing, right? Again, AI is not coming for your job. It's coming to make your job better. So I think of, in medical, I think of the field, quite frankly. So the role of the MSL is rapidly changing, and how AI can arm and equip an MSL out in the field to be able to extract data, to summarize information, to be able to distill that and disseminate that in an easy way, I think is hugely transformational, not only from a time perspective, but to really focus in on what you're hiring an MSL to do. Those are very highly trained folks, with very deep scientific backgrounds. Why would you want them to do a lot of busy work? Focus on the science, focus on, getting that message out to the rest of the industry. So I think that is one absolutely key area. Medical writing is another one. I know you can speak extensively on that one. So I think those are two really big areas right now. I'm going to go back to my previous point on just data standardization, which I know sounds boring and puts people to sleep. But if you think about the medical affairs function and where it is today, it is a nexus of a lot of different information. And so historically, we've seen medical affairs professionals having to swivel chair across various systems to be able to pull this information together, make sense of it, synthesize it, and write something meaningful. So anything you can do to fast track that continuum of activities is just going to make those folks focus on their roles better and faster. So again, I'm going to double underline, it's not an elimination of a role. It is making the role supercharged. It's getting the people to really do what they do better and faster.
Yeah. I agree with that. I like your framing of remove the busy work. And I think that's true across every function. Every function is under so much pressure. We see shortages in skilled expertise. I think that's the right lens. And there's another question here on the commercial side of the business. I'm guessing it's a similar framing as well, unless you think about that.
Yeah, it's similar. And we're sitting here in the end of Q1 of 2025. And what is the topic outside of AI, I should say? What is the topic du jour right now in biopharma? Well, it's this whole CRM split of Salesforce and Viva, which is obviously front in mind for chief commercial officers and commercial functions in general. And so what is that doing? Well, it is an unintended consequence of two companies that are now figuring out what their next path forwards are. It's literally forcing every company into making some kind of decision, some kind of change. And so within the realm of commercial, it's how do you rethink about your omnichannel strategy? How do you think about HCP engagement, which is a long and cumbersome process, but how can you figure out ways to automate that entire practice? How do you figure out what is the best way to reach out to your patient community and make patients feel more at ease with speaking to a non-human versus a human who might be having a bad day, quite frankly, right? So I think there is a lot of work to be done in that space. We are doing a lot specifically in the omni-channel and kind of the CRM front as this whole Salesforce Viva life event is before us. It's a once in a decade event. So I think it's front and center right now for commercial. Those are just a couple of different examples. We can get into field predictive analytics and a bunch of other different areas, but right now, those are the couple of things that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, that's great. There's so many questions rolling in. This is so wonderful. Please keep adding. Okay, I love this one. What are your thoughts about using AI in research? Many companies see using AI in research as losing creativity.
I don't know that I would agree with that assertion. I don't know how that's uncreative. But no, we kind of talked about this at the onset. So we talked about this, about using AI in drug development. It's been done a long time. There's been a lot of great new advancements over the last couple of years. You look at what Roche Genentech is doing with Lab in the Loop and the concepts that they're creating. Obviously, that is next generation, and again, a lot of investment, but it gives the industry a North Star to look forward to how they can be using AI for drug discovery. I talked about using AI in patient recruitment. I personally think that is a gold mine, especially as we get into this world of personalized medicine. I know a lot of companies still struggle with this, particularly as they're getting into more defined and more discrete therapeutic areas where you're only going to maybe treat on the upwards of hundreds or small thousands of patients instead of millions of patients a year. So how do you go find those patients, right? So I don't see that as uncreative. I see that as pivotal work that's essential to the R&D function. And I think leaders at the C-suite level are also looking to R&D to find better ways to invest. Like if I think about just the functional areas where most investment's gone, it's been in R&D. So I don't think leaders would say it's uncreative either.
Yeah, I agree. It goes back to sort of force multiplier, turbo boost, almost lets you be more creative. I
agree.
Because you can spend your time on those big questions.
I agree. And I even mentioned lab I should say lab in a loop, but there's also the whole lab of the future concept. So if you think about, all those folks that are running clinical trials and doing all these great things at sites, what if you were able to, again, not replace a human, but augment a human with an agent that's able to do a lot of those kind of more mundane activities in a lab, and do all those activities in a more automated way. I mean, that is the way of the future.
So
it's
then
incredible.
This next question to that then are we all doomed to be prompt engineers and agentic AI babysitters? Just human creativity.
Maybe. But I think jokes aside, I think people leaders are going to be agent leaders as well. It's going to be an interesting mix. And How you do performance management and all that other stuff moving forward,
Yeah.
I have no idea. But yes, people leaders are going to become agent leaders.
And so like, how do you prepare for that? If that is the future, how do you, prepare yourself, your organization for that?
I don't know, to be frank with you.
Yeah.
And I think we're trying to figure that out with companies as we speak. I think I'm going to give you the consulting answer as if it depends. My favorite answer ever, everyone's favorite answer. But it truly does depend on what the use case is and what the agent is being used for. Um, but yeah, this is definitely an ever evolving area. I don't have the answer to that yet, though.
I mean, my advice goes back to what I said earlier. I think you have to start. You have to
Yeah,
understand what does it even mean to be working with agents, let alone know how to be ready for that future,
correct.
right? And there's so many implications we haven't even thought of
Yeah.
yet, or as a community. All right, I'm going to take a couple more on here. This is a great one. Two more I'll take on here. You said there are many companies coming online. Is there a forum that talks about these and their capabilities? So maybe going back to your point of, leaders should be engaging with new companies, new vendors. Uh, how do they, find these companies?
That's a great question. I think, I think this is where, procurement functions are starting to use AI better as well.
Okay.
So we're actually doing a lot more work in this. So, I mean, from a consulting perspective, procurement is, we've had a love-hate relationship with procurement, mostly love from my perspective. So I'm not trying to, turn off any folks out there who are in procurement. We love you guys. But I think this is where procurement can certainly arm themselves with better ways to learn what the business is trying to do, what the objective is, what the problem they're trying to solve, and then find the companies out there that are putting out new and innovative solutions for it. Yeah. So I think that is one way. So being able to arm procurement with AI tools to then better search for companies like yours, for example, that can do things better, faster, and cheaper. I think the VC community has also been amazing at putting people in touch. I know we're sitting here in the Bay Area, so we're blessed to have a very vibrant VC community that's collaborative and really helps out Biopharma a lot by putting companies in front of leaders who could use that help. But I think, those are the two biggest ways that I think that, companies can start to really understand things. At the heart of it, it's people, right? So we're talking about agents, we're talking about machines, we're talking about automation, but there are great people behind these great companies. And so those people are always out there in the community making names for themselves. And I invite people at Biopharma to make themselves available to go out and meet these people, because I think you're going to really be fascinated with what you learn meeting people that are really trying to drive things and disrupt things.
Yeah, the only one I'll add to that is, in terms of the people, is not discounting just conferences and meeting live and meeting in person. Like, I've found it's so nice to just sit down with leaders and understand all these questions. How are they thinking about governance and strategy and buy versus build? And, I think it is people and relationship building.
Yeah.
In addition to the rest of the tactics. And maybe a follow-up question to that then is, are there any best practices to weed through and identify, within the startups there, who are the best in class?
I think so. This is, again, maybe it's a little bit of a nerd with me to some degree, and it kind of goes back to procurement. Me being the professional services game as well. We kind of feel this on a daily basis because we're getting vetted against our competitors. So it's very similar in nature. I think, and I think this is where procurement and business have to work better together. So oftentimes what we see is procurement will drive an initiative and learns what they can from the business on what they're trying to solve for. And then they're strictly responsible for, picking the 3 or 4 vendors that want to come in, do their dog and pony show, and then they eventually select somebody, right? And oftentimes what's missing is the business context. And so I think there has to be better collaboration between the initiator or the sponsor of a given initiative and working with procurement to figure out exactly what they're trying to solve for, and then figuring out what are the criteria by which we're going to go judge a company. And I think oftentimes I read RFPs and RFIs on a daily basis. And I can't tell you how many times I read those and it's unclear. We have these long Q&As back and forth to figure out what they're trying to solve for. They ask a lot of questions of us. And if that upfront work between the business procurement had yielded a better RFP and a better problem statement, then that would have helped them evaluate the marketplace much better. And so I think, I'm not trying to deflect, but I think it starts at that intersection between the business and procurement to really understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve for, and how big a pool of companies you want to invite to the process.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of sitting down and saying what's changed, like what has changed in our procurement process or what we vet. I mean, I look at some of these RFPs and sort of like you're going to end up with something that was built 15, 20 years ago. Just by the nature of the way you're asking questions or what you expect, it is different than what I would call this inflow of new companies are trying to build in different novel ways, still meeting regulatory requirements and compliance requirements and all of that. But what are the most important things that you want to qualify a company around? And almost rethinking that. All right, Bharathram, I'm going to end with my last question from here.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite Gen AI use case? Present company, obviously excluded.
A favorite Gen AI use case? Wow, this is interesting. This might be a little bit boring to folks, but it's interesting to me. So I spent the better part of the first probably 10 to 12 years in the healthcare compliance space in pharma. And I think one of the biggest pain points within the compliance world in pharma, in life sciences in general, was how do we take the legalese of our policies and our SOPs and what governing bodies are telling us and put this in a way to arm the business to know what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
And so as simplistic as this sounds and as basic as this sounds, is being able to integrate all of that information and have a continuous loop of continuing to add information into that pool to then arm a person who's sitting at their desk who has a question around, am I doing something that's going to get our company in trouble?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I doing something that as a company in a highly regulated space is going to put our company at risk? And so being able to arm that individual with not only what the laws and the codes are saying, but then what our company's policies and procedures are around that and what our legal stance is going to be around that is huge.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that is one of my favorite use cases that I've been a part of in helping build. That is a work in progress, especially if we think about doing it OUS, outside of the US and integrating all the, kind of global laws and codes out there. But I think, for me, having been in this highly regulated universe for 20 years, I think that's such an impactful one and such an easy win for companies that want to arm people to do right.
Yeah. We called it boring and basic, but I think that's incredibly powerful. and to me, that's really the theme of so much of AI, right? It's how do you take these workflows, this repetitive work, automation, the boring, and use it to make our organization more powerful.
Yeah.
Well, Bharathram, I think we could sit here and talk probably the entire day. But thank you for joining us. I think we should go ahead and schedule a check-in in 6 months because things are changing so fast.
Would love to.
But on behalf of Pierre and the folks who joined it, thank you for joining today and sharing your perspective. This was wonderful.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.